If people do not put God's house first, and I'm not talking about giving money, I'm talking about prioritizing God. Do you really think God's going to bless anything else in your life? I don't think so. But I guarantee you this, the devil will facilitate the way for you to have your life and get it done. But that's all you're going to get down here. Okay, we have spent the last many messages in a series on the Old Testament prophets, a series designed to give a deeper understanding, not necessarily of the content, and that's what I tried to say at the get-go. This is not exhaustive for the content, but the whole idea is to paint the picture of the personalities of these people, their courage, their wisdom, their faith, how God used them in His divine plan. So there's no accidental calling, and everything had a purpose. I've already said that the prophets are way more than dreamers and visionaries, or people displaying signs or speaking in a parable. But they obviously were used as vessels to communicate. And we see, if you start at the beginning, we see it's just a terrible decline of the people. It starts at the beginning. It's not like they started out great and everything was good. It starts way back there. And God was gracious enough to keep giving the message of turn back to God, understanding human frailty and the way our nature, the bent in our nature, which is opposite and away from God. So probably the most important thing that we have looked at is that up until a certain point, we had the prophets that came way before the exile was ever spoken of, the prophets of exile. We'll be looking at the post-exilic prophets today, at least one, hopefully, not more than one, because I don't want to rush through it. But the big thing that I'm asking you to look at, there's an undergirding here. One is to understand that in today's, I keep using this because it's the best way to describe it, in today's revisionist history, as people peddle the history of the people that are referred to in this book, it must be understood that multiple times we have read the covenant was broken. God didn't break the covenant, the people did. And you just have to, I'm sorry to say it like this, but you have to read what's there, not what you want it to say. So God there back in Deuteronomy said, here's a chapter that tells you about if you're obedient, and a chapter that tells you about disobedience and the consequences that fall on either side, good or bad. So God spelled out way back there in advance the consequences of disobedience. Now, why would God do that at the very beginning if there wasn't a capacity to know that that bent nature for sin is innately in each and every single one of us? Not as though somebody's born and they're born with goodness. And I know there's a bunch of people out there that'll argue that, but that's what this book is about. It says no one, not one, is considered righteous, but our own righteousness is as filthy rags, and there's only one righteous one who imputes his righteousness unto us for simply our faith in him. That's all. So we are in, as I said, a series on the Old Testament prophets. The classification of these prophets is the post-exilic. That means they ministered after the exile. Some have maybe a crossover. So for example, Haggai, we know that Haggai would have most certainly been born before Solomon's temple. And he's ministering at this period when they've returned, which makes him a really old man, okay? Very hard to say much more. So there are three post-exilic prophets. Haggai is one, Zechariah is a second, and Malachi is the third, but Malachi sits in a completely different category, and I'll explain that when we get there. So, but we're going to cover as much as we can today, and you might say, but Haggai is only a 2-chapter book. Yeah, but there's a lot there, you know, from the people who can camp out on one message for 50 messages. There's a lot there. So, all right, if you missed what I just said, don't worry about it. So, Haggai dates his prophecy very precisely. He says that the word of the Lord came to him in the 2nd year of Darius, that would be 520 BC, in the 6th month, which is probably like September or so, on the 1st day of the month. That's in your opening chapter and verse of Haggai. In the 2nd year of Darius, the king, in the 6th month, in the 1st day of the month, came the word of the Lord by Haggai, the prophet, unto Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, saying, and the message begins. So there are a total of 4 prophecies contained in this book, and the 3 other prophecies will follow. So it looks like all of the prophecies that Haggai speaks in this little book all occur within about 4 months. That's all. So when you're reading this, just keep in mind that it all came up pretty much at one time. Yes, I just did that. All right, so what else can I tell you here that's just colorful like I just did? So we know 2 things. One, Daniel continued to live in Babylon at least until 535 BC. Daniel's a prophet of the captivity. So Haggai's ministry took place at least 15 years later. That's to give you perspective on the timeline of the prophets themselves. We can deduce with great clarity, just as there are 3 waves of deportation, there were 3 waves of returnees, okay? So there was the first return shortly after the Persians took Babylon. That would be 538, 537 BC. That also, you can read and find that in Ezra 1:1, led by Sheshbazzar. The next wave was about 80 years later. Yes, you heard me right. In the 7th year of Artaxerxes, which would be 458 BC, led by Ezra. And the third came 13 years after that, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes, 445 BC, and you'll find that one in Nehemiah 2:1. Now, what's interesting, these 3 waves of returnees will be ministered to by Haggai and Zechariah. They are primarily the focus here. And what we begin to see is something really crazy. So I just mentioned the waves of the returnees. But if you were reading this book, and I say this book, the Bible, and you were along in the series when I taught out of Isaiah, you would know that Isaiah wrote about Cyrus being the one to issue the decree to let the people come back and build. So don't think that there's an error between the two. There's a lot that happens between names, secular and biblical. But the thing I want you to take note of is the fact that Isaiah wrote about Cyrus before he was even born. That's Isaiah 44 and 45. That he prophesied about 150 years before Cyrus was born. And now we have the proof of, or the veracity of what Isaiah said. And we know that, for example, there is a passage that opens in Nehemiah's writing that talks about Nehemiah being before the king as his cupbearer and what's wrong, and issues him the letters and so forth. So it all came to pass. And this is why I say to you, it's really important studying prophecy that has already been fulfilled, and you can see to what degree and precision it has been fulfilled, should be incredibly faith-building, not for just what's yet to come, but for how faithful God is in our lives. If He's faithful to keep His word to make something come to pass, and we as His children are claiming certain things in His name, then He's equally faithful for that. And that's just a little sidebar there. But anyway, all right, so now we have the edict that was issued for permission to return to Jerusalem, which is recorded twice in Scripture, one time in Ezra, chapters 1, verses 2 through 4, and 6, verses 3 through 5, the edict was that the temple should be rebuilt, and the cost, this is what is like, huh? The cost of that rebuilding would come out of Cyrus's coffers. I want you to think long and hard about that. That's mind-boggling in and of its own, that a heathen king would not only issue the decree to let them go back, but say, hey, and I'm also going to come up with some money to help you. Unheard of, just FYI. The other thing that's really important, because I mentioned Daniel here for a reason, that the timeline. It seems to me that if you read Daniel's relationship carefully within the successive empires that he assisted in and administered in, I really believe that God divinely ordained Daniel to be positioned with each and every one of these rulers. And I believe that Daniel had to have an influence even on a person like Cyrus. Or God could open his heart, but it took somebody to get in the ear and talk. So I think that there's probably that connection there. I don't think it's a big jump to say that that's what probably happened. Now, there's a list, a number of people. If you read in the book of Ezra, Ezra 2, don't turn there because I'm referencing things to give context. So Ezra 2, it references 42,360 people returned, apart from the 7,337 servants. So when we put that number together, it's just shy of 50,000. And we can conclude that, as I've been saying for weeks now, a substantial amount of people remained in Babylon or continued east, wherever they went, but never returning to the southern kingdom. That is a fact. Now, I need to pause here. There are different references on numbers. The number out of Ezra, I'd say, is pretty solid. What's not clear, and no one can tell you this, but what's not clear is how many people actually got deported and were taken into captivity. Now, if you read certain records and certain people's writing, including commentators, they'll say, oh, it was less than 10,000, and they multiplied in captivity, and there's a lot of different. I'm not sure at all that any of that is just a bunch of gobbledygook. I think that we don't have a record. We know, for example, of Zedekiah and Zedekiah's sons. We have the royal family. We've got records of that. But let's just say if there were 7,337 servants serving 42,360 people, that's a disproportionate amount of servants to the populace. So I just want you to think about that. The numbers, we don't know, but I'm telling you, if you're reading the commentaries that say, well, 7,000 went, 10,000 went, I don't think that's possible. And could so few people have lived and abided in the southern kingdom? What makes a kingdom if a kingdom is, I don't know, 3 people? I don't know, just saying, okay? So this does require a little bit of kind of critical thinking to understand why I'm mentioning this. So we can see that there were those that did return, that began to rebuild the temple. And here's some mystery for you. I just want you to think about this. Remember in our last studies, we looked at how basically they were profaning the temple, right? Do you remember that? They were profaning the temple. So now, the first thing that they're going to come back and do, they profane the temple by worshiping idols in there and false gods and whatever else they were doing in there. And their first act is to come back and rebuild the very thing they profaned. Now, you could say, well, it was their fathers or their forefathers, but it doesn't matter. That was the first act. And there's a bit of irony there, because if you, and I know most people in the sound of my voice who have followed this teaching have read the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, so you know that when they found the scroll of the law, certain people wept, certain people were confused because they didn't understand the language. There's a lot going on there, but my point is, would 1 or 2 or a half a dozen people crying because they heard the law read rekindle the spirit of obedience in a people that could never get their stuff together? And of course, all one needs to do is go from this period and look at the opening messages of what Haggai presents. That'll tell you enough to tell you the people had not learned their lesson after 70 years. So bear with me. All right, so they are going to rebuild the temple, first the altar. So in the second month of the second year, work on the temple itself began. And this is the first step, to lay the foundation. When this was completed, the people celebrated. Sounds like a good thing, right? And this is where we begin to see the opposition of the rebuilding efforts. Now, I'm sorry to be so choppy, but I do want to pause here for a second. Every ministry will go through something similar. You want to call it, for this ministry, if you want to call it the FCC, or what, every ministry that actually is preaching the gospel will go through something similar where there's such opposition. Sometimes it's to take the leader out, get rid of the leader so that the whole church can crumble. That's usually what happens when you have a pastor that's been at a church for a long time. The pastor dies or some scandal occurs and the church can't stay together because people are never taught about unity, how important unity in the body is. We all just kind of spin out of orbit and go our own way. So here too, at this particular junction, you have people coming out of the woodwork who are trying to stop the work. This begins to be described in Ezra, and there is something, I would say, interesting that happened. The same people who came back with the intent to rebuild, it's really interesting, they turned away from that work to go and rebuild their own houses. That's Haggai's first message of complaint to the people. So, the words, when it says, "Then the word of the Lord came by Haggai the prophet, saying, Is it time for you, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, and this house lie waste? Therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways." Now, here's the deal. These people were living in a foreign land. They weren't living in prisoner-type circumstance. We know they had great freedom. They come back with an order, a decree, a vision to rebuild, but it didn't take very long for them to stop and go, wait a minute. Let me go take care of me and mine first. What am I doing here? And if you think that this message is not applicable to the Church of Jesus Christ today, you're sorely mistaken. This is what people do. Let me take care of me and mine first. When I have money, when I have time, then I'll take care of the church and the matters of God. This is a very timely message. But in its historical setting, these were people called back, and they returned voluntarily to go and rebuild, and their first mission was go and rebuild the house of God. And this prophet's first concern is consider your ways. What is wrong with the people going to rebuild their houses? Don't you want the people to live in a nice house and to be comfortable? But the attitude of the people right here tells you nothing. 70 years in captivity, nothing changed, because what did they do? They may have started the work, but then they reverted back to self-serving. It's all about me. And I'm just going to, again, I've got many footnotes here. You cannot survive, and some of you are really going to hate me for this, but you cannot survive in God's program, in God's world, in God's ways, and be selfish. Well, I got to take care of me. Or be greedy. You know, that whole God thing, give to God, pray to God. This is what I'm talking about. It's very, very clear. These people had a lot of problems, and one of them was they basically figured their houses were more important than God's house. But if you understand, and this is the thing that can be totally bent out of shape the minute I say it, and people will take this the wrong way because people do twist my words. If people do not put God's house first, and I'm not talking about giving money, I'm talking about prioritizing God. Do you really think God's going to bless anything else in your life? I don't think so. But I guarantee you this, the devil will facilitate the way for you to have your life and get it done. But that's all you're going to get down here. And I'm at the place in life where I feel like, just give me 10 more years, because in 10 more years I'll be able to say whatever the heck I want with impunity, right? I think 70 is the age where you could just say whatever, and yeah, right? Nobody cares. Yeah, I just said that. Trust me, I watched Dr. Scott do it when he was in his 60s, but that was a different time. But while he was in his 70s, he did get away with a lot of stuff that would never fly today. But anyway, okay. What I'm saying to you, though, is that's what people tend to do. Because in the modern age, we have all these prioritizing events that happen in our brain, but we never think, we may just be like these people. When you are not acting in faith, when you're not living your life according to faith, when you're not putting God first in all things. And you might ask me, well, do you do that? I try. I'm not going to tell you I'm perfect. I'm certainly not perfect. I probably am at the top of the list for pluck-ups. Okay? Yes, I said it with a P. My point is this. If these people who had been taken away for 70 years, given the time to reflect, and come back with a mission that they couldn't complete because they were more worried about themselves, how are we going to make it? Just food for thought. I'm not going to give you the answer, but how are we going to make it? So you have here, the work comes to a screeching halt. And we have something that says it stayed in that state until about the second year of Darius. It stayed in that state. And just the foundation had been completed. And this is why God had to raise up these two prophets. So the first act of Haggai is what? To call out the people because they chose to take care of themselves versus taking care of God. There's one. Rebuilding the temple stalls out. So this requires getting the people back on track. Here comes Haggai with his message. And now if you read carefully, when he says, consider your ways. You have sown much and bring in little. Ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it in a bag with holes. A second time, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Twice. In just a few words, twice that occurs. And then here are the instructions. Go up to the mountain, bring wood, build the house, and I will take pleasure in it, and I will be glorified, saith the Lord. You looked for much, and lo, it came to little, and when you brought it home, I did blow upon it. Why, saith the Lord of hosts? Because of mine house that is waste, and ye run every man to his own house. And I'm asking you, this is a very uncomfortable moment in this message, but I'm asking you to think long and hard, not so much for the people that are here, but for the people that are not. I'm asking you to ask yourself, how different are you from these people? If everything is, I'm slightly uncomfortable today, I'm slightly whatever, I can't find a way, I won't even get creative on how to keep my commitments before the Lord. You might say, well, that's pretty harsh of you. You don't know my circumstance. You know what? The Bible's full of people with circumstances, full of them. It's up to us, and we have both testaments with eyes wide open to understand that there's a history here given to us for a reason, not just because God wants to entertain us with what those bad people did, because we're no different. That's what I've been saying. It's very easy to put self first and self needs first. This is why when you get to the New Testament, Jesus says, if you prefer mother, father, sister, brother, yea, in his own life also, basically over me, you can't even be my disciple. Those are huge words. They're not designed to make you cut everybody off and live an alienated life. The key word is prefer, that I put him first. There's people that think they're entitled, they deserve. He is. So think about that, because we're not that far away. It's unfortunate that I have to say that. It's like very unsavory, but that's the state we all, because of our frail nature, do get in. That's just part of our human nature, and then the devil makes it just go even more. So, back to where we are. So, if the temple was not rebuilt expeditiously, quickly. There's many reasons why God wanted it rebuilt. One was to reestablish that He is God, and then reestablish worship practices so that people could get back in line and back on track. But there's something else. If you think about it, the splendors of what they saw in Babylon, all the Babylonian temples that they would have seen, we know that they existed. The splendor of them would say basically a testimony to those gods, but God's house, the God of these people laid in ruins. It would be almost like, this is the God you worshiped, you don't even have a house that's standing. So there was urgency to rebuild it for a myriad number of reasons. We have to understand that. But definitely seen in a negative light, not a positive one. So this is where Haggai becomes critical. So in this 2-chapter book, his messages deliver what I call a long blow, and they are. This is a short book with a very, very long reach, because it not only hits the people, but that punch keeps going through time, because this is something that plagues every single generation. I'm not talking about a destroyed temple laying in ruins. But as a young minister, I told you, and I've repeated this story many times, as a young minister, I went over to the church just down the street, which used to be a burgeoning church, 1,500, 1,700, I don't know, members to the church. And when I was called over there to rescue that church, there might have been 5, 7, 8 members, I don't know. And you might say, well, that's attrition and that's normal. Is it? Or is it that the people just didn't prioritize God's house? And you can make all the excuses you want. I can say, hey, we have an aging congregation by attrition. But what does that mean for the people who are young or younger or able? And does it mean that we should all just buckle and collapse? I mean, again, some thought process. So the long blow that I'm talking about, again, goes back to a complacent and lackadaisical people who really didn't care that much. They weren't that concerned about the things of God. So if you go back and you read Ezra and Nehemiah, you've got a couple of people who prominently care about God and His Word. The bulk of the people, there was a couple of people that cried at the reading of the law. Some of them were confounded and asked for understanding. But if everything went according to plan and they rebuilt, and the worship practices, which were reinstituted, by the way, they had to be. We know that because when we get to the New Testament, we read about the opening passages of the father of John the Baptist serving his course in the temple, which means they had reinstituted the practices. But does it mean that there were faithful stewards? And again, I'm going to ask you one more strange question. As we read in the last 2 or 3 messages, many of the items that were housed in God's house were taken and profaned. So how exactly were they worshiping without those articles? Okay. I'm glad everybody's looking at me the same way, like deer in a headlight, because I'm saying to you, this is why you can never say that they re-implemented those practices, because much of what they needed to re-implement it was gone. They came back to rebuild, but a lot of things were missing, and if they didn't know what was missing, God didn't do a second take like He did with Moses. See to it that you build it according to the pattern. They had to be at least somewhat familiar, but the things that were missing could have never been recreated. Just think about that, because that becomes very important. So the first chapter, of course, opens with the people saying the time is not yet come. That is, if you read down, I kind of skipped over that. Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, this people say, the people are saying, the time is not yet come, the time that the Lord's house should be built. Procrastination? No, give us another 5 years and we might get it done. You know, I think on top of cowards, I think God hates procrastinators. I just said a mouthful. How many have heard somebody say, I will go to church, yeah, I'm going to go, and then they never go? I'm going to start reading my Bible. They find a million things, a million reasons why they won't. You think that God takes pleasure in that? Because that basically says, you're not that important. You're not who everybody says you are. Because if that's really true, then you're looking at this in a completely different light. But the people obviously said, the time hasn't come yet. We've got other things to do. So we have this mindset. The undertaking is too great. I'm just telling you what's here and what's not here. The undertaking is too great. The work is too much. And they had not yet gone back to reestablish or rebuild their homes. There's a lot of excuse making going on here. I'm holding my breath to say something because it's going to come across pretty negative. The church needs strong people in it. It needs strong leadership. It will always need strong leaders. The minute the church buckles and becomes soft, that's when you start seeing stuff that was never there before because somebody let it happen. They turned a blind eye, but God never turns a blind eye. So I want you to think about, there's like really palpable things for us to take from this book. Even though it applies to them, it applies to us. So they stop rebuilding God's house and begin working on theirs, and that's why Haggai calls them out. Now, immediately, he calls them to amend and change their ways and tells them to go up to the mountains. I just read that passage, bring wood and build the house, and God will take pleasure in it. Now, if I got a message like that, hey, God's going to take pleasure in that. He's going to be super happy. He's going to be glorified there. I'm going out with my pre-chainsaw, whatever implement, and I'm cutting down every tree that I see. If God's just pleased with that, then that's all I have to do for God to be pleased right now. Count me in, sign me up. But that wasn't the case with the people, as you know. So the message of Haggai, though, was not eventually in vain. He did stir up the spirit of the people eventually. It's sad, though, that they needed to be, after 7 years of captivity, that they needed to be stirred up. Just think about that. So they obviously are now stirred up, and even those that believe, that are following, maybe needed to be awakened to this effect too. And as I said, it's the spirit of procrastination. It's the spirit of relevancy, what's important. And I mean, the rest you can put together. So I said this before, I'm going to say it again. These people were selfish, they were greedy, they had this perversion of self-love, of self-deification. But here Haggai somehow manages to get them to wake up, and for a little time, they are building. I'd also label these people presumptuous, just in their behavior alone. And then one of the effects of the fall is, what do you think? It's led us to live for ourselves. If you think that that's survival, then we have different understandings. Because before the fall, God provided everything for Adam and Eve. So one of the effects of the fall is selfishness. These people are still, like we, in that mindset, take care of self, do for self. And it is one of the most impactful effects salvation has on us. So I'm going to say it like this because it could have affected those people just as much as it affects us. Do you remember many years ago I told you, every person who's in the pulpit, God gives a unique burden to them. I don't have the same burden Dr. Scott may have had. Mine is not to have a church sitting in downtown LA. Mine is simply to open up God's word, and I don't care where I do it from, whether I do it here, or I do it up north, or whether I do it halfway across the globe. Mine is to open up God's word and take from whatever I can to put it out there, and then you do whatever you want with it. The Lord laid a burden on me to go into the prisons. Dr. Scott didn't do that, and believe me, thank God those people are not here anymore, but some of the participants of this ministry made sure to tell me, Dr. Scott never did that. Well, that's why I told you, each person will have their own burden. We may all be in line to save souls, but each has their own burden. So, with that being said, when I say one of the effects salvation has on us is to care for our fellow person, man or woman, to have care and concern of, first and foremost, their standing in or outside of Christ. So you can very well see that That's something that has never changed with God. So these people, when I say selfish, I'm going to explain now. No place to worship means no evidence of following God, because that was the only way to follow God. And no following God means, how can somebody be saved if they're not going through the rituals and through whatever the priest is supposed to do? So it's all of this kind of circular motion. For us, Christ must be first. The Lord was not pleased with this people that basically he delivers them and they come back once more and it's like, okay, but he says, I'll be glorified here. So keep building, and they do, obviously. But if you read verse 9, where he says, because mine house that is waste, and you run every man to his own house, it's important to understand God's not blind. He's not blind to the activities of our hands or our heart in that day or in this day. So he also says, therefore, if you keep reading, therefore the heaven over you is stayed from dew, and the earth is stayed from her fruit. And I called for a drought upon the land and upon mountains and upon the corn and upon the new wine. So basically, you know what? You came back here. You're supposed to be committing your way. Instead, you're asked to consider your ways. So for that reason, I'm going to shut the heavens up. It's not going to rain. And what does rain do? It affects crops. So your ability to eat, it affects your livestock and their ability to eat and to provide. It affects everything. So just a careful reading of that says God is not only not pleased. Now, he's going to reverse that. You'll see towards the end. He says, I've opened the heavens and I've done all this now. But right now, he's not pleased again. So I'm asking all of us to just kind of stay in the mindset of saying, how is it possible, if you even could understand why the people were taken away, how is it possible that literally right here within 11 verses of this small book, we're right back at God kind of being PO'd at the people? How is it possible? So this is why I say to you, this is a very important book. If you keep reading from verse 12 on, then Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel and Joshua the son of Josedek of the people obeyed the voice of the Lord their God and the words of Haggai the prophet, as the Lord their God had sent him, and the people did fear before the Lord. So it's interesting that this whole little pivot happens in just a few short verses. We're going to go build our own houses. We're going to go take care of self. Haggai, consider your ways. The Lord, consider your ways. Okay, we will obey. The question is, was the mouth moving with the heart? Just saying. All right. Because you just got to love the fact that it makes no sense to me that God would have to work this hard. And we're talking about a number of people that's relatively easy to manage too. So just think about that. Now, here comes your second, actually. Then spake Haggai, the Lord's messenger, in the Lord's message unto the people, saying, I am with you. So guess what? Go build, go be obedient, and I'm going to be with you. Those are the bullet points there. And the Lord stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and the spirit of Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, and the spirit of all the remnant of the people. And they came and did the work of in the house of the Lord of hosts, their God. So it's very interesting. Somehow, by whatever means, we have a job seemingly done. Now, the Lord is trying to get these people to not look at the impossibility, but what he would enable them to do. And I'm asking you also to think about that when you consider this church. God's not asking us to look at the impossibilities, what's impossible, what can't be done. For he is the God of impossibilities, right? So even for a church like this, you might say, well, why am I saying this? Because I've tried to say over and over again, a church requires people whose heart is in tune with God, who desire to keep the word alive and being proclaimed. And as I just said to you, I can do that from anywhere. But we cease to be a community that comes together if everybody just decides to take care of self and stay away because it's inconvenient or it's far or whatever. These are small, I don't even want to call them sacrifices. That's a terrible word to use. They're small moments in time that you either see as an opportunity of faith or you look at it as a total waste of time, and you have to figure that one out. So, in the 4th and 20th day of the 6th month of the 2nd year, all of this took place. In the 7th month and in the 1 and 20th day of the month came the word of the Lord by the prophet Haggai, saying, Speak now to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, to Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, and to the residue of the people, saying, Who is left among you that saw this house in her first glory, and how do you see it now? Is it not in your eyes in comparison as of nothing? And this is a very interesting struggle here to get the people to see. What was more important? Because if you remember Solomon's temple in all of its splendor, the gold and everything that was there, this temple would not be as glorious, but God's trying to say, if I'm there and I'm glorified, that's all you need. It'll be just as glorious. So I want you to think about that. And then, of course, the statement, Be strong, O Zerubbabel, saith the Lord. Be strong, O Joshua, son of Josedek, the high priest. And be strong, all ye people of the land, and work, for I am with you, saith the Lord. According to the word that I covenanted with you when ye came out of Egypt, so my spirit remaineth among you. He didn't say, so my covenant remaineth among you. And I'm not saying that he says here it is severed. He just says, so my spirit remaineth among you. Don't be afraid, fear ye not. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, Yet once it is a little while, and I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land, and I will shake the nations. Very important that you read this properly. And the desire of all nations shall come, and I will fill this house with glory. Now, when was this house filled with glory after this time? It was not. This passage can only point to a future time. The shakings of the heavens and of the earth can only point to, and the desire of all nations. Now, that crystal clear desire of all nations, future time, will be the Lord Jesus Christ. Very interesting of all the things that people can choose to ignore and not explain. The silver is mine, the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than of the former, saith the Lord of hosts. Ask yourself, how is that possible? Ask yourself how it is possible if the temple they rebuilt didn't have all the splendor and all the materials. How could this house be more glorious than Solomon's house? Just ask yourself that question. And in this place will I give peace, saith the Lord of hosts. So there is a prophetic word here, because this couldn't be applying to that temple. But it could be applying to the temple in the future, and that is a fact. In the 4th and 20th day, the 9th month, the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, Ask now the priest concerning the law, saying, If one bear holy flesh in the skirt of his garment, and with his skirt doth touch bread, or pottage, or wine, or oil, or any meat, shall it be holy? And the priest answered and said, No. Then said Haggai, If one that is unclean by a dead body touch any of these, shall it be unclean? And the priest answered and said, It shall be unclean. Then answered Haggai and said, So is this people, and so is this nation before me, saith the Lord, and so is every work of their hands that they offer there is unclean. Does that sound like God is saying, y'all did good? No. So again, there's more lament happening. And now I pray you consider from this day and upward, from before a stone was laid upon a stone in the temple of the Lord, since those days were when one came to an heap of 20 measures, and there were but 10, and one came to press fat, or to draw out 50 vessels of the press, there were but 20. I smote you with blasting, and with mildew, and with hail, and all the labors of your hand, yet ye turn not to me. Consider now from this day upward. Again, we're looking at, this is another one of these, we'll call it pushback statements. There is no, let us come and reason together, right? So the way the people are being addressed tells you it's not as though they finished the building and they understood that God said he'd be glorified there. But how could it be the most glorious place. How could it surpass Solomon's temple? There's only one time that that could ever happen, and that's when the stone that the builders rejected stepped into the temple once, but it is pointing to the future time when he will yet again set foot into a temple that has not yet been built, and that will bring the greatest glory of all, what? The desire of all nations. So, keep reading. Again, the word of the Lord came unto Haggai in the 4th and 20th day of the month, saying, Speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, saying, I will shake the heavens and the earth, and I will overthrow the throne of the kingdoms, and I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the heathen, and I will overthrow the chariots and those that ride in them and the horses. In other words, God will be victorious, and he will overcome and overtake. And shall come down every one by the sword of his brother. In that day, saith the Lord, I will take thee, O Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, saith the Lord, and I will make thee as a signet, for I have chosen thee, saith the Lord of hosts, a symbol of him who is yet to come. Now, why do I think this is so important? There's so much in this little book, but even nestled in between words that are, I'd say, more derogatory and not, that Haggai was encouraging, but God turned around and said, you know, you're an unclean people, basically. There's hope nestled in there pointing to Christ. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. How is it possible that people could read this book, people of every faith, read this book and not see or not understand that, for example, has God yet become the desire of all nations, and specifically the person of Christ? No, he has not. And the shaking of the nations, that has not yet happened. It will happen. And remember, I told you there's double fulfillment. So there is this that says, I will put down your enemies, because God did ultimately in the successive kingdoms. But there is more to come, yet to happen. So the encouraging part to this is seeing, we'll call it a future. Not necessarily for these people. And I'm going to ask you to look at something as we kind of head towards, we will look at Zechariah next. But I just want you to think of the final book, which is still considered a minor prophet in the Old Testament, Malachi. What was going on in Malachi, which was written 400 years before Christ? Priests, the priests who are supposed to set the tone for all the people, they are the ones that are offering defective offerings. They are the ones trying to cheat God. Now, if they're doing that, there's a trickle-down effect to the people. So it means that the corruption was never rooted out, the commitment was never there, and as I've said now for many weeks, by the time you get to Christ, this is why Christ referred to the Pharisees and the Sadducees as whited sepulchres, full of dead men's bones. Think about it. What was going on that was following or glorifying God at the time of Christ coming, except for going by some routine where people were just performing perfunctory acts in the temple? So I guess the big thing is that, as we'll see as we get into Zechariah, because Zechariah actually paints, this is the what I call a little breadcrumb that points you to Christ, but Zechariah unfolds messages that are replete, not just pointed to Christ, they are telling you about Christ. And that in the future, that's how Zechariah, the last few chapters of Zechariah is talking about a future time, is reflecting back on the very same people who refused. And of those people, of their descendants, there will be a remnant that will be awakened, that will become desiring God. And as I said, I read earlier, the desire of all nations, which will include this small remnant of people. But I ask you very carefully to consider, does this book sound like the people did really, really good and they rebuilt, and the end is they all lived happily ever after worshiping God? No. So it's important to understand that this little book, filled with divine information, gives us insight still that there was still something defective in the hearts of the people. And that defection, by the way, still lives in every heart that has not been washed and cleansed by the blood of Christ. That defection lives in every child that is born. That's not a statement of negativity. That's a statement of fact. And when we do indeed come to Christ, and there are some, again, that practice Christianity with lip service, but when we actually yield ourselves, as the scripture tells us, Romans 12 is at the top of my list of scriptures, but as we yield ourselves, we can and do become vessels of righteousness for Him, useful for the kingdom, profitable for His use. But what if we took the posture of these people? I'm tired, I don't have time, I'll get to it later, I'll give later, I'll read later, I'll pray later, I'll take care of God's things later. Now, in my world, and you can be mad with me or not like this, but in my world, you don't get to choose your time. In my world, God chooses your time for you. You can exercise and you should take care of the temple. You can eat good, you should take care of the temple. There's a lot of things you should do to take care of the temple, but not temple worship. And I mean by that, worship of self. So as the body, it seems to me very, very clear, there's a caution for us. That caution is not something, what's Pastor talking about? It's a caution that's already permeated this church and many other churches. The love of self over the love of God, and the preference of doing for self and taking me, I will take care of me. This is the principle of tithing. I don't tell people you must tithe, but I tell people about the principle. The principle is you take care of God first, He'll take care of the rest, no matter how much or how little. That is a spiritual law, not a law on tables of stone, but one that should live in our hearts. And these people, of all people that just freshly came back, it should have been fresh in their minds that God can also, the same hand that took them away, that let them come back, could have wiped them out in a day. Now I'm asking you just to consider something. I'm not asking you to consider your ways. I'm not alluding to any specific message here, but I am asking you to consider something. Is the Church of Jesus Christ, and I'm not just speaking of Faith Center or Westcott Christian Center, but the church at large, are we really any different if we're not putting Christ first? If we're not, I'm not talking about taking care of the building. The building is stewardship. But the people, the church is a people who belong to the Lord, the outcalled ones. How outcalled are we if we prefer to just stay in our comfort, relax, kick back, and, somebody else will take care of it? And this is what I'm asking you. Don't just take the historical message of Haggai and say, yes, the historical background, the political background, the societal norms, but I'm asking you to consider that this book actually is a reflection of something that has never been healed until the coming of Christ, until actually Christ's resurrection, has never been healed. And that is what is inside our hearts. Because we are, above everything, self-serving, self-deifying, rationalizing, self-justifying creatures. Christ comes into your heart, and when the eyes and the heart start seeing differently, you start looking at things differently, and you no longer think, how am I going to make it? But the Lord will provide for me. The Lord will make a way where there is no way, because that's what this book is about. But these people couldn't even learn the lesson in captivity, that God, He is, when He said, don't be afraid, I am with you. Words He uttered from cover to cover, but He made sure to tell these people, it should have been comfort to them. God is still with us. He hasn't departed. But yet, what I tell you is that is the caution for the church today, to be in the Word, not the Word propagated by the charlatans. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to say it. Propagated by some of these charlatans that are around our president, or people who come in the name of Jesus only telling you good words about your success and your possibilities. But how about this? The church in America, not just Faith Center, Westcott, the church in America is in peril right now. And it's in peril because every focus is in the wrong place. The reason why Faith Center is not packed with people is because people want entertainment. They want somebody that fits the illusion of what a person of God should be, if you can explain that to me, whatever that is, that's what people want. It's all based on, again, it's rooted in self. I want a pastor that fill in the blanks, right? I want a pastor that speaks nicely. I want a pastor that tells me how good I am, how great I am, how wonderful. How about somebody who stands and with all unpleasantness tells you what you need to hear because it's what you need to hear? And I wish I could take this message and take it not to every church, but to every person who's standing in a pulpit and say, wake up, because your chance to tell people of their lackadaisical attitude towards the church is coming to an end soon. And if you really care about souls and you care about your brothers and your sisters, you start by putting God first in all things. That means, even in this little gathering here, the people that are here, well, you're here, but there's a lot of people who choose every single week and for years. It's easier to stay at home. Consider your ways. And also consider this. As I said, I will preach the gospel, whether I preach it here, or I preach it there, or I preach it somewhere else. I'll keep preaching. But unfaithful, lazy, complacent people who think somehow they have a place in the kingdom, I'm not asking people to work. I'm asking you to faith. I'm not asking people to go out and do. I'm asking you to trust God and believe that God, who can change hearts and minds and does, will also do that for Faith Center, which we've been praying for. Many of us have been praying for this. The problem is, it's very easy to fall into the trap of saying, so-and-so, a person who might have been faithful, well, they're just going through a time. Well, if you're going through a time, what do you do when the stuff's hitting the fan? Do you push away or do you press close? You press close. So I'm telling you, the message from Haggai may be a little bit more touching on self in this day than people actually care to think about it that way. But I'm telling you, as someone who loves the church, who loves God, that this is a very important series, not just to understand the underbelly of it all, but to see how it actually applies to us and how we think somehow we've arrived. But have we really, when churches are being either pastored by parrots who don't care about the Lord or the people who belong to God, or people who just treat God as an afterthought, something they can deal with later. And guess what? Later will come, but it will come as a surprise to those who think God will be very tolerant of being backburnered year after year after year. Look at the children of Israel. That's all you need to know. And we serve a merciful, gracious, and forgiving God, but that doesn't mean, as Paul said, that gives us license to sin all the more and treat him just exactly like that repeatedly. Think about that, because that should be something that resonates in our hearts and minds, not just for the rest of the week, but for the rest of our lives. That's my message. You've been watching me, Pastor Melissa Scott, live from Glendale, California at Faith Center. If you would like to attend the service with us Sunday morning at 11 a.m., simply call 1-800-338-3030 to receive your pass. If you'd like more teaching and you'd like to go straight to our website, the address is www.pastormelissascott.com.